Straight
Clarity as a revenue strategy. Now, the definition of clarity, just so we can be clear and we can all be on the same page. Clarity is defined as the quality of being coherent and intelligible. In short terms and simple terms, it just means you are on the same page with yourself. You are in congruence. Your conscious thoughts, your subconscious thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, everything is aligned and all on the same page. As a coach, as a business coach, business consultant, and even back in the days when I was making basketball content and a lot of players looked at me as a coach for them in basketball, even though I was never technically a basketball coach. And I was showing these players how to practice. The biggest challenge that I found with people, and this ranges from entrepreneurs who are at the 7-6 figure levels, going to back to athletes who are 13 and 14 years old trying to make their high school basketball teams. The biggest challenge I found amongst people when they are looking to improve or advance is a simple lack of clarity. People don't know what they're doing, how or why or when or where they're going to go in order to get there. And they have so many ideas in their head that they can't figure out where to center or where to focus, or they have no ideas in their head. So therefore they can't figure out where to center or where to focus or just how to get started. So what clarity does is it basically is the big domino that solves all of the problems that I just listed. Solves all of these questions, it solves all these problems, eliminates all the questions that now no longer need to be answered. And thus it puts everyone on track to actually do the things that will deliver actual value. Was now put you in line to make money, because when you're delivering value to people, people will be willing to exchange their resources, usually money, for your resolutions, which are some form of a product or a service. So let's talk about clarity today as a revenue strategy. Point number one, today's topic, once again, clarity is a revenue strategy. Confusion is costly. Any of you has ever been confused in your business about what you're doing, how, when, where, and why you're doing it, or your customers are confused about what you are doing, how, when, where, or why you're doing it? That type of confusion let me say that again. Let me say that differently. That confusion, when your customers are unclear on what you're doing, how you do it, when, where, why you do it, for whom you do it, and or you are unclear on any of these things, we all know this is going to cost you money. All right, it's going to cost you money that you don't even know it's costing you, because a bunch of customers who would spend money with you are not spending the money. People who are spending money with you are not spending as much as they would, could, or should, simply because they're unclear on what you offer, how you offer it. And if they're unclear, that's because you are unclear. It is your job as the entrepreneur, it's your job as the person on top to be very clear about who, what, when, where, why, and how you're doing what you're doing, so that everybody else is clear on it. And the more clear you can make it for yourself, the more clear you make it for others, and the easier you make it for others to make decisions about how to move forward with you. And anytime things are not clear, it is costing you money that you don't even know you're missing. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? So if you ever been to a place called In-N-Out Burger, I don't think In-N-Out exists down here in South Florida. I was looking into it when I was making the notes for this episode. Let me look it up here on Google Maps while I'm talking to you all. I don't think there's an In-N-Out Burger anywhere around here, but I might be wrong. Is there an In-N-Out Burger? There's a bunch of In-N-Out Burgers popping up, and I'm looking on the map here, and it looks like there are 0 In-N-Out Burgers. There's some place here that's showing up. What is this? Oh, I'm looking on Google Maps for In-N-Out Burger. For some reason, they're showing my company as a favorite here. But there's a bunch of In-N-Out Burgers in, what town is this? Not a bunch, excuse me. 2 of them I see in Houston, Texas. And then all the rest of them are in Southern California. This looks like the Los Angeles area. There's a bunch of them there. Then there's a handful of them in Northern California, up in this looks like might be Sacramento. It looks like I see one in the Bay Area, and then another one over in eastern part of California. Maybe, I can't tell if this is California or this is Nevada. It looks like it might be in Nevada. But anyway, the In-N-Out Burger place. Everybody's heard of In-N-Out Burger, even if you've never eaten there. I have eaten there because I've been to California multiple times. So In-N-Out Burger is a restaurant that, again, as I said, I was in one in California many years ago, and it's notorious for having a very simple menu. Never been to it. You can go look up their menu on the internet, which I was doing when I was thinking of what I'm about to share with you right here. They have a double which is basically a double cheeseburger. They have a regular cheeseburger. They have a hamburger. They have French fries. And they have 3 types of milkshakes: strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla. And that's it. That's the whole menu. Double cheeseburger, regular hamburger, French fries, and 3 milkshakes. That's it. Then they have, of course, the drinks. So you want a Sprite, you want a Coke, they have those. Then they have this thing called the not so secret menu. Even that is relatively simple. The whole point here is I'm using them as an example. The simplicity of their menu makes it very easy for you to decide what to eat. I remember when I went into In-N-Out Burger in California, there was a line out the door, literally out the door, to go buy something at this place. There was nothing special going on. It was a normal day. It was like a Tuesday at like 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There was a line of people out the door. And you would think, and there's a line out the door, you might be standing there for a long time, but the line moved very quickly simply because it ain't too many choices to make when you're standing in line at the In-N-Out Burger. And I'm not saying every business needs to be this simple, but I am saying that if you're just getting started and you want to increase the velocity of what's happening in your business, one simple way to do it is to simplify things. Stop making things so complicated and make it easier for people to understand what you're doing, to process what you're doing, and to make a decision that best suits them. And the more simple you make their options, the better chance they're going to come to a decision. Even if that decision is to walk away, at least they walk away with clarity, knowing why they're walking away, as opposed to walking away in confusion because they're not quite sure what they should do, would do, or could do. And they don't want to feel dumb by asking you a question because the complexity of what you're offering might fool them into believing that you expect them to understand it. And if you put it out, then you are expecting them to understand it. And if it's not clear, then that's your fault, not their fault. When you understand all of this. Okay, so when things are simple, such as In-N-Out Burger, it's easy for people to decide what to eat. And it cuts down the friction when it comes to buying decisions. And while I'm talking about something as simple as ordering a burger and fries, this applies all the way up to the highest levels of products. Look at a company like Apple. Now, how many of you are owner of an Apple product? Whether it be the watch, the earbuds, the phone, the tablet, or the computer. Most of you probably own something that is Apple made. And even if you don't, you know exactly what they offer and you know exactly what the names of all their products are. The ones I just named, you know the names of all those products. The AirPods, the iPad, the iPhone, the Mac or MacBook. What else did I mention? The Apple Watch. All of you know the names of these products, even if you're not a customer. What other company do you know of that you can name all of their products and you never bought one? Some of you have never bought an Apple product. You're just not an Apple user, but you know names of every single product they have. Why is that? Because it ain't that many of them. If it was too many products, you couldn't name all of them. Can you name every car that Honda makes? No. Can you name every car Mercedes-Benz makes? No, you can't. Can you name every product Amazon sells? No, because there's so many of them, you can't remember them all. But you can name everything Apple sells, even if you never bought one. Why? Because it's so simple, and Apple makes a lot of money. Okay, they don't give you too many options. All right, the phone costs many multiples as a burger and fries, but because there are so few options, they still sell a whole bunch of them. It makes it easier for people to make a decision that I want the phone. All right, which one do I want? Do I want the 500 gig or do I want the 1 terabyte? Do I want the regular size phone or do I want the one that's so big that I could barely fit it in my pocket? Those are basically only decisions you get to make. That's it. 2 decisions. And more options means people need more time to make a decision if they ever make a decision. Confusion costs you as a seller, costs you as an expert, and it costs you as a practitioner because you have to figure out what to do, how or where or when to do it when you have too many choices yourself. The clarity for the customer is one thing, clarity for you is another thing, which leads us to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is clarity is a revenue strategy. Number 2, clarity accelerates decision making both for them and for you. Now, the word decision comes from a Latin word whose meaning is literally to cut off. That's what the word decide comes from, a Latin word that means to cut off. In other words, the more clear you are in what you're doing, the faster and more easily you can make decisions. In other words, the faster you can cut off any other option besides the one that you'll go with. Now, why does this matter? Most people are very slow to think and slow in thinking because they have too many options. They are slow in decision making because they have too many choices to choose from. And most people are slow in action because there are so many different directions in which they can go. Most human beings, most of you listening to this, if you live in the Western world that is relatively safe, relatively free, and compared to the way that some people live in some parts of the world, most of you listening to this are relatively rich compared to the way a lot of people live in the world. You have this plethora of options. You got a lot of things you could think about, a lot of decisions you could make because you have so many choices, and a lot of different directions in which you could go. right? Even if you feel like you don't have that many options, you have a lot more than most people. And this plethora of options that you have available to you slows you down because you are trying to decide amongst all of them. When you have fewer options, it's easier to make a choice. When you go to In-N-Out Burger, it's not hard to decide which burger you want because there's only three. You want the double cheeseburger, the regular cheeseburger, or the hamburger with no cheese. Which one you want? There's only three choices. What you want? And you make the decision that quick. And when you are clear on what you want and why and when you want it, it's much easier to increase your speed in all three of those areas: thinking, deciding, acting. You're clear on what you want, clear on why you want it. Thinking, deciding, and acting becomes easy. You as the practitioner, you as the expert, if you want the people you serve to be faster in thinking, deciding, and acting, here's what you should do. Give them fewer options so they take less time thinking about it because they ain't got much to think about. Novel idea, right? If you, as a practitioner, want yourself to move faster, here's what you need to do. Same thing you need to do to your customers. Give yourself fewer options. Why? Because now you have less choices to choose amongst when it's time to get things done. Steve Jobs, he's the mastermind behind the Apple company that we know of today. He is famous for doing what? Those of you who know the story know that he started Apple back in the 80s. He gets, or maybe even the 70s, get kicked out of his own company when they went corporate. The company, Apple, Steve goes on and does a couple other things. He started this company called Pixar, which many of you may have heard of. Then Apple is stumbling and starting to falter on the brink of actually being out of business. Apple was about to go out of business because the people who took over the company after they kicked Steve out, they weren't doing it the right way. They call Steve as a last resort, hey, would you come back and run the company? Steve comes back and runs the company. One of the first things he does is he fires a bunch of staff and he cuts a bunch of products out of the product line. Apple had too many different products, too many different computers, too many different brands and styles that made it hard for the customer to make a decision, made it hard for the salesperson to sell people stuff because there were too many things to sell. He cut everything down to a simple product line. One desktop computer, one laptop computer, and that's pretty much what Apple went with for a while. Then he came out with this innovative product called the iPod. That was the one that just held music, putting all this music in your pocket. Then he came out with a product that cannibalized the iPod, which was called the iPhone because it had the iPod basically in it. Then he combined a web browser and a phone all into one product. And again, the reason why the iPhone took off, for those of you who don't understand, please go on YouTube right now and Google the presentation, not Google, but YouTube, the presentation Steve Jobs made when he first introduced the iPhone. And this presentation is one of the most famous marketing presentations done in the history of marketing. If you are a marketer, and all of you are marketers, especially those of you who are entrepreneurs, you should know about this presentation. And you need to know about it not because you're a tech geek or an iPhone fan, but because of the simplicity of the presentation. Steve Jobs twice said from the stage, we are combining a phone, a web browser, and an MP3 player. And he said it twice and the crowd went wild. And the reason why the crowd went wild, yes, because it was a great and exciting idea and because Steve Jobs had a bunch of his own fans in the audience, but also because of the clarity of the idea. The clarity of the idea is why the iPhone took off. It was very, very clear. Everyone knew what an MP3 player was at that point because Apple had been selling the iPod. Everyone knew what it was to buy a device to put a whole bunch of music in your pocket. That was revolutionary at the time when it came out. Those of you old enough to remember. Then he said, we're going to take a phone. Everybody knew what a phone was because we had cell phones at that time. Most people had a cell phone where you could send text messages and you could make phone calls, and that's pretty much all the phone did. And everyone knew what a web browser was. That's when you went to a computer or a computer lab where there were a bunch of computers and you got on the web and browsed. Steve Jobs took three ideas that everyone already knew and accepted as useful, and he said, I'm going to combine them into one device. Everyone got it immediately because of the clarity of the presentation. That's the reason why Apple is Apple today, because most of Apple's money comes from selling the phones. And most people only buy a phone, once every 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Yet, most of their money comes from selling the phone. Apple is not selling a million different products like Amazon. Apple makes most of their money from one product and the clarity of what that product is. And that's how they dominate the market. So you can increase your speed in all three of these areas with clarity. If you're a high school athlete, for example, and you have 10 different schools offering you scholarships, well, now you got to make a decision. Which one of these 10 do I want to go to? Maybe 5 of them you can eliminate because for whatever reason, you don't want to go to this type of school, you don't want to go to this location, etc. Now you have 5 left. Now you got to go visit all 5 schools. You got to talk to all 5 coaches. You got to remember the players on all 5 of the teams. You got to decide academically which one is different from this one amongst the 5 that you have left, and maybe there are 3 of them you narrow down to. You still got to decide amongst the 3. And you still got the coaches from all 3 schools calling you every day, trying to convince you to come play for them. However, if you're a high school athlete who has only 1 scholarship offer, well, how much time do you need to take to decide where you're going? You don't need any time because you only got 1 choice. You see, When your options are limited, it's much easier to make decisions. It's much easier to move fast. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to arbitrarily eliminate your options or make yourself so, let's say, undesirable that you only have one choice. What I'm saying is, even if you have a bunch of choices, you need to come up with a system to eliminate so many choices from being in front of you so that it's easy to make a decision and easier to move fast. Remember that force equals mass times acceleration. That is the importance of what you're doing multiplied by how fast you do it. It's not just one or the other. It's not just do important things slow or do non-important things fast. It's do important things and do them fast. That's how you create force in life. That's a scientific law, all right, codified by Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, so you don't want to have to take too much time figuring out what option you're going to go with, and the fewer options you have, the easier it is. Sometimes clarity is handed to you by the universe. Right? It happens to some of us. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how clarity is a revenue strategy. Number 3, clarity is a confidence builder. Now, why is clarity a confidence builder? Because when you know exactly what you're doing and there is no confusion about what you're doing and you're not second guessing what you're doing because you don't have a second option to second guess about, because there's only one option, there's no confusion. And when you have no confusion, usually you create more space for confidence. Why? Because again, what else could you be doing? Nothing. All right. This is the only thing I got. So I might as well be confident in this. I have no other choices. When you're not wrestling in your mind with multiple options and multiple choices, it's much easier to think clearly. And when you can think and act clearly, you can move a lot faster. There's a lot less confusion. There's a lot less slowing down of the process because there's a lot less friction. Therefore, you will feel more confident because you can act more decisively. And when you act decisively, other people who notice and feel the actions that you're taking decisively, they tend to look at you as a more confident individual simply because of the swiftness of your movement, especially compared to the average person out here who is confused and held back by all the different options that they have available to them. So in this way, this is how clarity actually makes you a more confident individual, because you don't have anything else to choose from. You don't have anything else to think about. This is the only option that I have, so I might as well move with this one. And you're able to move more quickly, more decisively. You are more firm in what you're doing. You can't second guess because, again, there is no second option. It increases your confidence. And in my experience from talking to athletes, talking to entrepreneurs, from the starting out entrepreneurs to the very seasoned entrepreneurs in all different types of industries and all different types of business. If I ask people, what's the number one internal trait you want more of? If you could increase it and just have an unlimited amount of it, what is it? But it has to be something intangible. The number one answer, overwhelmingly, 95% of the audience says confidence. Dre, I want to be more confident. I want to have more self-esteem. I want to believe in myself more. I want to operate with more of a healthier self-image. One way to get there are several things you can do to get there, but one clear way is increasing your clarity. And I just explained to you why. All right. You tend to be more confident when you are fully focused on what you're doing. And another reason for this is because your subconscious mind doesn't have conflict. One thing you don't want with your subconscious, you don't want your subconscious mind in conflict with your conscious mind. Because even though the subconscious is ultimately going to win, no matter what the conflict is, no matter what your conscious mind wants, ultimately the subconscious mind always wins those conflicts. You still don't want the conflict because the conflict is going to slow you down. Any internal conflicts you have, i.e. you're thinking one thing, but you're constantly thinking one thing, but your subconscious mind is thinking another thing, that increases or that introduces friction. You don't want friction. Friction slows things down. When you are really clear on what you want, there are no plan Bs, no alternatives. That clarity, it leads to clear thinking, clear communication with yourself and to others as to what you're going for, the methods by which you're going to get there. All these things translate into confidence. And when you are able to communicate confidence to others, they assume that your confidence is based on something real, because most people are not going to do a deep dive on you and find out if what you're presenting is real or not. Just going to go off of what they see. Why? Because most people don't have that kind of time to dedicate to you. Now, most people are thinking about themselves. Most people will go off of what you show them. And if you show it consistently, and you don't have to remember to do it because it's real, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're presenting yourself a certain way. People believe you're that way. You actually are that way. And it just reaffirms itself the more you do it. And the more you live it, and the more people respond to you the same way that you're presenting yourself. And this means other people will follow your lead. Why? Because most people are confused. Most people have a lot of internal mental friction. Most people are very unclear on what they're doing, why they're doing it, when and where and how they're doing it. So when someone comes along like you, who is actually clear on what you're doing, guess what they'll do? They will follow you because, wow, here's somebody who's doing something that I ain't doing. I wish I could be more like that person. Let me follow them. Maybe some of that will rub off on me. This is the internal conversation people have when they see you with clarity. CEOs, leaders tend to have an abundance of clarity in terms of what they want, even if they end up being wrong. Now, you ever been around somebody who was super, super clear and super just very firm and confident in what they were doing and what they were saying and ended up being completely wrong? Yeah, you can laugh about it now, but at the time when they were communicating what they were communicating and leading, everybody was following and listening to them. True or not? True. Now, the person who is 100% right, but they're unsure of themselves, nobody follows them. You also think about what that means when it comes to your marketing, your branding, and the way you put yourself out to the world. Recapping today's class, which is clarity is a revenue strategy. Definition of clarity is the quality of being coherent and intelligible. Number one, confusion is costly. It costs you in time. It costs you in money that your clients aren't giving you. It costs you in money that prospects aren't giving you. And it costs you in energy that you are wasting just trying to figure things out on your own. And that leads to all the other downstream things that I just said. Number two, clarity accelerates decision making. The word decision comes from a Latin word that means literally to cut off. When you are clear, you cut off all other options. It makes it easier to make a decision. Think about a restaurant like In-N-Out Burger. It ain't too many options on the menu, so it's very easy to choose what you want to eat because it's not 1,000 pages in the menu. You want to compare that to a place where there are a lot of options. As far as I'm concerned, too many options. Look at a place like the Cheesecake Factory. Next time you go to the Cheesecake Factory, look at the menu. The menu is like a fucking book. There's too many pages and there's too many different things that they make. I say, what does this place specialize in? Probably cheesecakes. All the food's trash. Anyway, we won't talk about that today. Number three, clarity is a confidence builder. When you know exactly what you're doing, there is no confusion about it. And then you feel a lot more confident. Why? Because you're not wrestling in your mind with multiple options or choices because you only gave yourself one option, one choice. Therefore, you can go clearly and boldly directly towards the one thing that you have decided because there are no other options. All right, these are hidden secrets that are out there in plain sight for anyone to use if you would just put them to work. You want to learn how to put these to work with me as your direct coach, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. We have a couple different ways you can get involved, a couple different levels of commitment and engagement you can get involved with, but we have something for everybody who is listening to this right here, workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.